Today we're going to be reviewing the line of primary optics known as their prism scopes. These come in multiple magnifications and calibrations. Today we're going to show you what you can expect in the box of a basic optic straight from Primary Arms, and how to get those mounted and up and running on your rifle so that they will remain reliable for you throughout your day of shooting. So first of all, let's have a look at the box. It's packaged nicely, lots of instruction on the outside of the box, very professionally done. Really happy with the way that these are packaged. Inside, as you can see, we got foam liner to protect the optic, an owner's manual, and this basically says, hey, stop, read it before you just run out and mount this optic and start shooting, because there's some important information on here, not only about how to use your reticle, but also about mounting up the optic, which we're going to cover today in the video. Got a lens wipe, 2 scope covers. These are flip up. You can open these and see through them for inclement weather. A couple of wrenches. We'll be using these to ensure that the base of our mount is tight on the optic. We'll be tightening those 2 screws up. We're going to cover that here shortly. So this is your basic Primary Arms prism optic. This one's actually a 2.5 power, but they come in different magnifications and set up for different calibrations. So we're going to move this box out of the way and we'll have a look at the optic a little more. So one of the first things we're going to do when we open up this optic is we're going to remove these 2 screws from the base of the mount using the supplied wrenches. We're going to degrease those and apply Loctite to ensure that they don't back out. One thing I noticed is these were actually pretty tight, surprisingly. A lot of times these are fairly loose, and the optic will come loose halfway through your day of shooting, which is a real problem. If you read your manual, it'll tell you to make sure these are tight, but we're going to go ahead and do that beforehand. So there's your mount, your 2 screws, your optic. We're going to take these 2 screws and we're going to begin degreasing these in an acetone bath. So here's your acetone, guys. If you aren't familiar with that, you can pick this up at your local Walmart, Home Depot, Lowe's, probably Ace Hardware. Going to go ahead and take some of the acetone. I'm going to put it in a small metal or plastic cup. Don't use styrofoam. Just enough to submerge the screws. We'll now set that to the side. Let's take our 2 mounting screws that came out of the base of the optic, put those in the acetone and let them soak. I'm also going to take this Q-tip and I'm going to clean out the mounting holes on the bottom of the optic. Now, you don't want to submerge the optic or get any acetone on the outside of the optic. We're just going to clean these holes out, just degrease them. And anytime we degrease something with acetone, we're going to make sure that it has a few minutes to completely dry so that that acetone has completely evaporated. We'll now take our fancy weapons cleaning brush and we're going to clean the threads on the screws, making sure that there's no oil left on the threads of the screws before we install those into the optic. A lot of times these screws will be oily from the manufacturer to prevent corrosion, so we want to get all of that oil off of there. We'll set those aside to dry. Let's talk about Bruce's budget trick for those of you that are thrifty and economically challenged. If you don't have a fancy smancy weapons cleaning brush, you can use your wife or daughter's toothbrush or just an old toothbrush laying around the house. You're going to toss this when you're done. And if you don't have acetone, a big bottle, you can go to CVS and pick up a small amount of fingernail polish remover. This is just a couple bucks and it's 100% acetone. Let's talk about our Loctite. This is Loctite 242, the most common version out there. Comes in a little bottle like this. If you don't have Loctite 242, you may find some Vibratite VC3. This is used on a lot of competitors' optic mounts as well and works just fine. So we're going to take our 2 screws once they've been completely dry after being degreased, and we're going to apply a drop of Loctite to each screw. So here's the 2 screws. We're going to apply 1 drop of blue Loctite to the threads of each screw. That's all it takes. Don't overdo it. So we've cleaned out the 2 screws on the optic. We're going to line up our base and add our 2 screws. Just thread those in by hand. Supplied wrench, we'll just tighten those down, not too tight in the beginning. Okay, we'll add our 2nd screw. And at this point, we can snug them down. Keep in mind, these are going into an aluminum base, so you don't want to put too much torque into them. Just enough to snug them down. All right. So to mount this up, simply going to place the mount over the Picatinny rail on the rifle. I like to center this up about where the ejection port is, but you can adjust that depending on your amount of eye relief that you want on the optic. I'm going to take a 1/2 inch socket, 6-point, and just snug those down. Again, we're not trying to break them off. We're just going to snug them down so they don't loosen up under recoil. And we're all set. For those of you that want to upgrade a mount, this is our mount upgrade. We're going to look at this GDI mount, but almost any of the other mounts that are out there are going to be similar in process to this. So we'll just cover this one. You can see that the GDI comes with the 242 Loctite and the screws and a little instruction manual that tells you how to install it. This is made for an ACOG, but since the Prism optics from Primary Arms are made for ACOG mounts, it's going to work perfect on here. So let's open up the Loctite package and see what GDI supplied. So Loctite 242 and a couple of screws. So we're going to degrease these screws in the exact same method as we did the other screws, also making sure that we clean out the holes in the bottom of the mount. So this GDI Arcom mount will mount either way. You can put the lever on the left side or the right side. That's up to user preference. I typically run it on the right side over the ejection port. There's also a series of holes in the bottom of the mount, so you can adjust the optic forward or rearward, just depending on where you want your mount to sit on your upper. We've got our Loctite on our screws, so we're going to go ahead and install those by hand. The screws that come with this particular mount happen to be flat tip, so we'll use our flat tip screwdriver. Tighten those up. Again, not too tight, just nice and snug so they don't back out. Okay, good to go. Snug them down. Again, I like to just line this up right over the ejection port, usually on the farthest slot forward on the upper receiver. Now, if you need to tighten the tension on the mount, there is a flat tip screw rather, on one side of the mount, and you can tighten that, turning it clockwise, to add tension or loosen it, turning it counterclockwise to loosen the tension. Okay guys, I hope you found this video informative. For those of you that are interested in buying a Primary Arms Prism Optic, or if you've already got one and you're just looking as to a little instruction on how to install it, please check out my other videos, and as always, thanks for your views.